Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are mapping out a truly revolutionary, absolute paradigm-shifting approach to understanding human psychology. We're going to look at the work of Alfred Adler. He's a pioneer who completely redrew the boundaries of how we view psychological neuroses. As we sketch out these ideas today, we're going to step away from the traditional view of mental struggles as these isolated internal malfunctions, and instead look at how they connect to the world around us. Okay, let's dive into this. It's a pretty provocative question, isn't it? For a long time, psychological disorders, things like anxiety, phobias, or depression, have been viewed almost entirely as chemical malfunctions, or maybe as dark internal conflicts just echoing in the isolated caverns of the individual mind, completely disconnected from the outside environment. But what if that's wrong? What if your mental struggles aren't just things that happen to you, but rather they're protective tools your mind actively creates? Section 1. The social nature of neurosis. So the traditional view kind of traps the patient in their own head, right? But Adler, he essentially grabs an eraser, wipes that isolated view right off the board, and draws a much broader picture. He brings mental illness out of the isolated individual mind and places it squarely into the complex web of social interaction. He actually defines neurosis in its essence as a social problem. It's fundamentally a collapse in the bridges of communication between the individual and their world. It's not just a broken gear inside a machine, it's a severed connection between a person and their community. Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. Life's 3 inescapable tasks. To understand why those bridges collapse in the first place, we have to understand what life actually demands of us. Because, well, life isn't a spectator sport, is it? It requires our active, continuous participation. Adler posits that life puts 3 main, totally inescapable tasks before every single human being. Number 1 is work. Number 2 is society, which really means forming friendships and community bonds. And number 3 is love, and that includes marriage and deep partnerships. Now, succeeding in these 3 tasks is not easy. It requires a really high degree of what Adler called social feeling, a willingness to cooperate, to engage, and quite frankly, the sheer courage to face difficulties. But here is exactly where the problem starts. Sometimes, due to a flawed upbringing, maybe, excessive pampering that didn't allow a child to develop resilience, or on the flip side, severe cruelty that made the world seem entirely hostile, a person develops a fragile ego. To this fragile ego, these normal everyday tasks of work, friendship, and love, they don't look like normal life. They look like massive crushing burdens that threaten their very existence. And so, rather than facing life with courage, the neurotic individual chooses to retreat. They choose isolation. Section 3. The alibi of symptoms. Now, this is arguably the most controversial, yet totally fascinating part of Adler's theory. Because if a person is retreating from life, how do they justify it to themselves and to others? Adler believed that psychological symptoms are not random attacks. They aren't viruses that just catch you off guard out of nowhere. Instead, they are what he called teleological. That just means they are purposeful, goal-oriented tools. The neurotic lifestyle actually summons these symptoms, whether it's a panic attack, chronic insomnia, obsessive thoughts, or even medically unexplained physical pain, to serve a hidden goal. They create an alibi. The symptom acts as this heavy shield, guarding the individual against the terrifying risk of social or professional failure. The internal narrative of the patient often sounds something exactly like this. I would have achieved great things, and married, and made friends, if not for this anxiety that paralyzes me. It's brilliant in a dark kind of way when you think about it. The symptom perfectly preserves the patient's illusion of an ideal, flawless self. They never have to actually test their abilities in the harsh, unforgiving reality of the real world. As long as they are sick, they remain completely perfect in their own minds. Section 4. The hesitation trap. And this brilliantly illustrates how, to actively maintain this protective illusion, the individual has to constantly maneuver through life using hesitation as a primary tactic. They engage in prolonged overthinking. They actively sketch out distances and build massive barriers between themselves and any decisive action. Now, this distance protects them, sure, but it also completely severs their connection to reality. Furthermore, they demand exceptional treatment from everyone around them, basically expecting society to revolve around their needs and their symptoms, much like their parents might have done when they were toddlers. Which leads us to a highly uncomfortable realization drawn from Adler's work. Neurosis isn't just about suffering. It's actually often a subtle, semi-conscious way of exploiting weakness to dominate others. By being the sick one, the weak one, the one who just cannot cope, the neurotic individual forces the people around them, their family, friends, all of society, to adjust their orbit. They control the room, not through strength, but through fragility. Section 5. Adler versus Freud. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is, to fully appreciate how groundbreaking this is, we have to compare Adler directly against the dominant perspective of his time, Sigmund Freud. For Freud, the focus was all about internal, inevitable conflict. The clash between our primal instincts and our moral conscience. But Adler's focus? Social evasion. Freud saw the source of our issues as biological and instinctual. Adler saw it as sociological and purposeful. Remember that word we used earlier, teleological. And finally, Freud viewed symptoms as the return of a repressed childhood past. But for Adler, patients aren't trapped by their past. They actually weaponize their past and their symptoms as a strategy to avoid their future social responsibilities.
Section 6. The courage to belong.
So the crucial point is, if neurosis is an avoidance of life's tasks, then what exactly is the path forward? The main takeaway Adler sketches out on the whiteboard for us is a truth that is simultaneously harsh and incredibly liberating. Mental health is not the absence of pain, anxiety, or struggle. True health is the courage to get involved in life anyway. It's the courage to engage with the world, to work, to love, to build friendships, despite our deep flaws and our fears. Hiding behind the walls of illness is, at least in Adler's view, the ultimate existential failure. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Engaging in society, facing failure, experiencing heartbreak, these aren't anomalies. They are literally the cost of admission. They are the tax of belonging to the human race. So will you pay that tax? Will you choose the terrifying courage of social connection or the safe, paralyzing illusion of isolation? It's a choice we map out in our lives every single day. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a powerful new framework for understanding the architecture of your own life.